This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. It's hard to imagine that we ended up here from here. Now, the Yamaha Pacifica actually has quite an interesting history and shares a designer with the Ibanez RG. So Rich Lasler is the name of the guy that came up with these designs, and you might kind of see the resemblance to an Ibanez RG. At the time, in the 90s, of course, the Floyd Rose type trem was a thing. This one's actually created by Yamaha, but it is Floyd Rose patented. The double locking thing, the kind of Kramer-ish inspired headstock, and I don't mean the guy from Seinfeld that turned out to be racist. And yeah, but what is clear about this guitar to me, they had kind of two body designs, right, over the years. Also, an interesting neck join. There's just so much which is interesting about the older Pacificas, and almost none of it seems to carry across to Pacificas of today. So that's why I'm asking in this video, kind of what happened to the Pacifica. There's such a fall off in terms of innovation, in terms of what I think of as interesting guitars. Although, you know, this absolutely may not be the specs for you. It's kind of at least, you know, had a pocket within the guitar world at the time, and even to this day. This thing kind of 3 P90 style pickups as well. This belongs to my buddy Chris, who is a huge fan of the Pacificas and the history of the Pacificas. So Chris, if you're watching, cheers. You saw as well in the intro there that LED was keen to have a go and play with that. Anyway, so what happened? Basically, I think what happened is that the Pacifica kind of got a little bit successful and has turned more or less into what it is today, which is a middle-of-the-road kind of Fender-ish competitor, maybe, that doesn't really have any aspirational qualities. They don't make an expensive version of it. Everything that is kind of cool about the older Pacifica kind of ends up being a little bit boxy, right? So you get this kind of, you know, hard edges, a satin finish, which actually I think looks quite cool. But, you know, a boxy neck join, what was a sleek and thin neck is now just a fairly middle-of-the-road neck, where once you might have had interesting inlay designs, is again middle-of-the-road kind of whatever. It does have actually, this one is their kind of top of the range, about 600 quid, the Pacifica that they still make these days. This is the Pac 612 7X. So they do have Grover tuners and Wilkinson hardware, and Seymour Duncan pickups. So it's not like they're skimping in some ways. It's just like they've kind of regressed, I think, in a lot of ways to making what is actually quite a middle-of-the-road guitar, and doesn't really have anything specific about it that would mean that you would choose this over something like a Mexican player. I don't know, let me know your thoughts on that. So I think what happened is that the Pacifica sort of has very much stagnated since about 2011, which was when I think these types of designs started coming out. When they first came out with these designs, even though they had some kind of single pickup designs and some bits and pieces that kind of nodded back to the old Pacifica. Since then, basically all of the Pacificas now are more or less this format of HSS. They do have coil splits and stuff, but the other real problem with the Pacifica line, to me, is that there's not really anything to differentiate the very cheapest of their range with the more expensive end of their range. And therefore, what you end up with is a line of guitars which kind of just stops because there's no aspirational element to it. So you think, you know, if it was a Fender Strat, for example, you can pay anywhere from 200 to sort of 20 grand, right? If you really think about it, you can buy a Fender Stratocaster at any price range. And I think having that aspirational element to things where it's like, all right, well, I've got a Squier, what if I got a Mexican Fender? I've got a Mexican Fender, what if I bought an American Fender? I've got an American Fender, what if I bought a custom shop? You have this kind of constant staircasing element to things where it may be real or not, but at least in the mind of the person looking at Fender Strats, there's always something else to be aiming for. The Pacifica doesn't really have that because the beginning of the range is about 200 quid, and then the top of the range is about 600 quid. They're all made in the same factory. The only slight differences around kind of the hardware that you chuck into the pieces of wood that are slapped together. The quality, I think, is there. These are built in Indonesia, as far as I'm aware. It says made in Indonesia, that's your clue. But, as I say, for me, not really the same type of guitar, not really the same, I don't think, league of guitar either in terms of I don't know, like actual quality, actual interest, taking chances in terms of the design. And yes, in some ways now, you know, like a Floyd Rose guitar might seem kind of dated for some stuff, or might suit you perfectly for other stuff. But the fact that they had something to them, I think, is what is missing. We got a large frets, we've got an Ibanez style neck, we got different interesting pickup configurations, we got, you know, double locking trems. What happened? It kind of, it feels like it's not even the same kind of guitar at all. It doesn't have the same DNA. It's just interesting to me. So I'm hoping that at some point in the future, maybe Yamaha can come somewhere back and reclaim the glory of the name Pacifica, because actually it's not what people like me these days associate with Pacifica. The Rich Lasner connection is real. The guy who came up with Ibanez RGs alongside Steve Vai. You know, there is a heritage of this guy creating incredible guitars, including the Weddington, which you may or may not have heard of. I hadn't until Dr. Elphick pointed me in the direction of that. But Yamaha did have a real era of making some great, interesting guitars, and maybe it doesn't have to be over. Let me know if you tried an old Pacifica, one of these older type guitars. You can pick them up for pretty reasonable prices. I think Ty Tabor even had a signature one of these. But yeah, a very, very different guitar to the sort of Yamaha Pacifica that you see strung up on a wall at a primary school or a secondary school. I think that's where Yamaha have ended up being kind of in the student bracket of guitars. And I think the Revstar has actually given me quite a lot of hope that they can get outside of that, because the Revstar does solve this problem in terms of having like a expensive Japanese version that kind of is all singing, all dancing, and then they quite generously throughout the range, actually even the Indonesian ones are really well spec'd, stainless steel frets and stuff, as well as being interesting, bold designs. So I'm hoping that maybe in the future Pacifica could get that kind of mojo back